The Biden administration finally admitting the president flat out lied when he accused Border Patrol agents of whipping migrants. The head of the Border Patrol announcing the results of a months-long investigation into the incident where Democrats and the media claimed that agents were striking illegal border crossers.
After an extensive review, the U.S. Attorney issued their decision not to prosecute the case. OPR found no evidence Border Patrol agents involved in this incident struck any person with their reins intentionally or otherwise.
The false claims that the border agents were whipping migrants was quickly debunked. But remember, that didn't stop the Biden administration from smearing the Border Patrol on horseback who were just doing their job.
To see people treated like they did, horses barely running them over, people being strapped, it's outrageous. I promise you those people will pay.
And as we all know, it also evoked images of some of the worst moments of our history where that kind of behavior has been used against the indigenous people of our country, has been used against African Americans during times of slavery.
Saw horrifying images that do not reflect who we are, who we aspire to be, or the integrity and values of our truly heroic personnel in the Department of Homeland Security.
The horrific video of the CBP officers on horses using brutal and inappropriate measures against innocent people.
The 4 agents aren't out of the woods just yet. They're being referred for punishment for using offensive language and unnecessary force. The agents could be suspended for up to 14 days. Unfortunately, Border Patrol not the only ones being attacked by the Biden administration. The White House accusing Texas Governor Greg Abbott of causing chaos over his moves to send illegal immigrants back to where they came from.
I'll say this, that immigration enforcement is a federal authority, and states should not be mandating it, meddling in it. That is just, especially Texas Governor of Abbott, who has a track record of causing chaos and confusion at the border. But again, this is immigration enforcement is a federal authority.
Jessica, I'm going to start with you. The fact is that the president didn't just lie here, but you had the most powerful man in the country, the most powerful woman in the country, the vice president. You had Maxine Waters and the rest of them. You've got them prejudging a situation, creating a false narrative by these powerful people, and they were just wrong. I mean, should they be in these positions making these judgments, given the fact that they didn't even know what the facts were at that time?
Well, I'm certainly not willing to say that Joe Biden shouldn't be president because he got this wrong, or Kamala Harris.
It's real simple, this one.
Well, he should backtrack, and he should say that he was wrong. And they have a 511-page report that they can refer to. And they did find that there were failures at, quote, multiple levels of the agency, lack of training, dangerous behavior, et cetera. That's something that CPB has to deal with. But when you publicly demonize someone or an organization or an institution, it does damage to morale within that institution, obviously, and to those that support them. And this was something that even Democrats who represent constituencies along the border were saying that, you know, this is actually how it's supposed to be. I am not someone that typically rides a horse, and I did not know that that's what was supposed to be going on. And you should just eat crow on this particular one and say we were wrong about this. These are the reforms that need to happen to make sure we don't have this dangerous behavior again, and then move on.
Isn't it their job, Joey, the Border Patrol, to make sure that things at the border go smoothly and to not let there be chaos at the border? And I'm not even addressing the issue of
Let me tell you something. They're in a man alive that spent 40-something years in the government that has the calloused hands or the intellect of the men on that horse. And that's really the heart of this problem, is that there's the American people and then there's the elite class that get to think they govern them. I mean, to think you can stand there and accuse them of the most egregious intent in the world, to be racist and trying to whip people when they're trying to enforce a policy that this administration ideologically stands fundamentally against. Think about this. We have an entire agency of government whose mandate is to enforce the border and control the border, and they have people in the White House that are fundamentally and ideologically against that notion. So what do? They use them as a scapegoat, they demonize them, and then they look for any little technicality. They said that they are going to punish them because they used offensive language. Now, don't you think if that were a racial slur, that's exactly what they say they did? So they probably said something like, "Get the hell back."
Yeah.
And because they yelled at them and raised their voice.
There are quotes in the report of what they did.
And I believe Richard Fowler was on today trying to say that the people on horseback were wrong because we have some standing agreement or policy to let specifically the people of Haiti into this country. We do, at a border checkpoint.
Yeah.
So they can get on a horse and push those people towards a border checkpoint all day long. And that's what they were trying to do. And there's some places that only a horse can go. So when Americans sit there and watch that and they see those men and or women on horseback, they go, wow, those are people willing to do anything with calloused hands to protect this country. And they see a man in the White House who can't get a sentence out of his mouth, accuse them of things, and they say, yeah, that person is unfit to be president.
Well, not only is he unfit, Katie, I mean, if he can see something literally on a videotape, make a judgment, a prejudicial judgment, what the hell is he doing on the world stage with leaders who are playing him like a fiddle?
Yeah, he's turning on the very agents whose mission it is to protect the American people, to secure the border, and to protect the economic prosperity of the United States of America. That's the mission of Border Patrol. And this is a perfect example of the problem of the suits versus the boots. They are punishing, and they've already punished these guys because they took them off the front line. They've sat them at a desk. They took the Horse Patrol unit off of that part of the border, making it easier for the cartel and criminal elements to operate. And they were doing their job. They were trying to protect the American people from illegal immigrants. Doesn't matter where they're from. They're illegal immigrants coming across the border illegally without permission. And we don't know who these people are. They don't have any vetting. They have no paperwork. We don't know who they are. There's been tons of criminals who have come across the border. They just simply did their job. And so for Joe Biden to get up and say immediately that they were guilty, that they would be punished, and then today you have Customs and Border Protection come out and say there is no evidence they did anything wrong, and yet they are still going to be punished, is the very definition of a political witch hunt. It's an abuse of power. And I hope that these agents have some kind of recourse at some point. And for Secretary Mayorkas at the beginning, who said they weren't whipping anybody, they don't even have reins. He defended them initially until he got a phone call from the White House to save President Joe Biden's ego and his pride because he lied about what happened and continued that narrative for the sake of, the people who are pushing it. It's despicable and disgusting, and exactly what's wrong with their border policy in general.
Greg, when you think about it, the idea of going after Border Patrol, who they put at the border on horses, who they say protect the American people, and then they want to punish them when we've got how many pounds of fentanyl that are coming into this country on any given day, killing Americans left and right, and they're worried about this situation, and they're not even checking for the fentanyl?
If you want a definition of a truly dystopian universe, it's when the authority tells you that you've done nothing wrong, but you're still getting punished. I mean, it's the old line, show me the person and I'll show you the crime. That's exactly what this is. You can't find it. I mean, this would make Kafka proud. This is, right up there with 2 + 2 = 5 and Orwell's 1984. It's like, yeah, we found nothing wrong, but you'll be sentenced to 5 years of hard labor.
It's kangaroo court.
Well, it is. That's the thing that I think should disgust everybody in terms of offensive language. The real offensive language was comparing Border Patrol to slave owners, to calling all of this. They use this language, this dramatic language. It's horrific. It's brutal. They will pay, and it's like that rash, hyper-dramatic tweet you put out that gets all the attention, and then when it turns out you're dead wrong, the correction is just a little mouse squeak, and nobody, or it's New York Times putting it on page B35 so no one finds it. This story is important for a lot of reasons. It's part of the pattern among the Democrats and the media not to care about an issue until there's an American villain to amplify. So there was a lot of bad stuff going on at the border. You bring up fentanyl, there was lots of chaos, suffering, coyotes, rape, but there was no story without an American Darth Vader. Do you remember how desperate we were on this show to get people to cover the border? And then all of a sudden, it was like the spigot got turned, the spigot that was turned off got turned on, full force, and then it was like around the clock. It was incredible, and it was another colluded enterprise of media and the Democratic Party to create a hoax. And this is why people have lost trust in the media. They've lost trust in the government. They've seen the fine people hoax, the drinking bleach hoax, this hoax, there's the Russian collusion hoax. They see the Democrats and the media in bed together. They can't trust them. And then they amplify this story, and then they bury others. So we talked about the Hunter Biden stuff being buried, but let's not forget 50-plus migrants died in a truck driven by a meth head.
Yeah.
That story got, what, a half an hour?
Yeah.
Think about that. Biden cared more about vilifying a single individual than the 55 or 56 people that died in that truck.
And several thereafter.
Right.